Hello and welcome back to Wine Wednesday. I'm Kevin here at French Grocery, and today we're talking about stories and wine and how they're inseparable. Well, I got to thinking. I didn't have any ideas. I didn't want to go into some other appellations and talk about some technical details this week because, I have to keep coming up with this content every week, and we're going to get into the holidays, and we got to talk about champagne and so many other great things. So what do I really do here? And what do I do for my customers and friends here? We talk about wine and we tell stories. I find myself a lot of times just telling a story about a wine because a lot of the technical details of the soil and the elevation, all that stuff might not make any difference to you at all. So today I just picked out 4 things kind of randomly, things that I pass by every day, thought I would tell these stories, and maybe, might inspire you to drink them, or at the very least, just to learn more about other wines here and all the great stories behind them. So this one I always thought was pretty cool. So this is, the producer is Chateau de Pouligny-Montrachet. They are now owned by the Monti family. That's a great winemaking family in Burgundy, one of the best, but it wasn't always that way. More recently, before the Monti family, they were owned by some kind of large financial institution in Europe. I don't remember the one, but you can just imagine it was an investment. It was a large, maybe a luxury part of their portfolio to own. But they did what most people would do when they had an erosion problem in one of their prestigious vineyards. They shored it up. They tried to intervene, built some retaining walls, as I understand. This all ended up in moving some dirt around. Well, the dirt is sacred in Burgundy, absolutely sacred. And that is something you can't do, even if you have an erosion problem. So the appellation board, the higher-ups, the gods of Burgundy, whoever got to make the decision, they stripped the appellation from this vineyard where the work was done. So just like that, you no longer have a Premier Cru vineyard, or just like that, you no longer have a named vineyard. You don't have anything that you can identify the terroir on the label. So what do? I mean, they were probably already making a Bourgogne Blanc, which is just Chardonnay that can come from anywhere in Burgundy. But why do they still put some of their best fruit in there? So they just bottle it still on its own. They try to identify it as uniquely as they can. Clos de Château de Pouligny-Montrachet, which just means the wall of Château de Pouligny-Montrachet. It doesn't tell you much. And you wouldn't know unless someone told you the story, because they're not really out there talking about it a lot. They still can't make any more of this than they used to, but it's a great wine. It's a great value. It's in the 30s. Drinks like a Premier Cru, Burgundy, and you get to drink some Chardonnay by some of the greatest Chardonnay makers on the planet, really. And that family is terrific, and this wine's an awesome value, so don't walk past it again. This is Domaine Arlot, another Burgundy producer. It just says Oka. It has a picture of a mule or a horse, perhaps. Maybe a mule, I don't know. But what does that tell us? It doesn't tell us much. It's certainly not a Premier Cru vineyard. But this is another case like this where it was stripped of its appellation status. Probably long before, I would say, this producer, this farmer, was working these vines. You have a lot of inter-family squabbles going on in Burgundy. Ultimately, somebody with power, some bureaucrat at the sort of appellation boards stripped property of its appellation status. I don't know, maybe there was an affair between couples. I have no idea, actually. I think there's a lot more we can learn about this, but I've always found this really interesting that once upon a time this came from vines that could have been in Gevrey-Chambertin, or that could have been in a single vineyard cuvee. But now, you look at the map and you see it's been carved right out of it while there are vineyards around. And to make things worse, we used to actually have the cuvee that was from that single vineyard, but in 2013 they had terrible, terrible hail in this neighborhood. And things got worse. 2014, more hail. 2016, you've been following the news this year, some of the worst weather we've had in Burgundy in quite a long time. Late spring freezes killed fruit and blooms, and then even more hail for anything that survived. And the consequence is they don't really have enough fruit from that initial vineyard to make a cuvee anymore. So this still has to be combined with another vineyard that they used to have as a separate cuvee. And ultimately what we have is a really delicious wine. It's amazing what they were able to do in a tough year. good producers can do that. Stories can help us feel a little bit more confident about taking risk on wine that came from some bad vintages. The only story behind here is the name that people look over all the time. I'm always amazed at how every year the new vintage comes in. I still got a few bottles of these left, but that Villain there, that is Aubert Villain. That is Mr. Domaine Romanée-Conti, the most expensive wine in the world. And this is maybe, well, no, I don't even think it's fair to say that it's a hobby. No, this is his domain that's outside his back door. He lives in the Côte de Chalonnais. He makes the wine here. His nephew makes these wines and is being groomed. He'll always, I'm sure, have a place in Domaine Romanée-Conti. We have the most pedigreed and trained hands in the world making these wines. And sure, they're not from even the Côte de Nuits. They're Côte de Chalonnais. They're less prestigious, but these are absolutely delicious wines. They have all the structure. They have all the care they need to age. And this wine is in its 30s, and people walk by it all the time. I think they probably have no idea the masterful hands behind this wine. This is another cool story, too. So this is a joint operation. It's a wine from Gigondas, La Paire, and it is one of the best Gigondas, I'd say, certainly one of the most, phrase I like to use, eminently drinkable. I mean, you can drink a whole bottle of this on its own. It's old vine Grenache, really soft tannin with big explosive fruit, wonderful aromatics. But this is a joint operation between the Brunier family and Kermit Lynch. So you've got iconic wine importer and iconic winemakers, the folks behind Blue Telegraph. The old family that owned this, when they wanted to sell it, they didn't particularly want to sell it to Kermit Lynch, not because there's anything wrong with him, I think, but they didn't want to sell it to Americans, and they didn't want anybody outside of their neighborhood really to get their hands on what was a very esteemed terroir. So Kermit Lynch kind of went in as a silent partner of sorts. The Bruniers, it seems, got to use their influence and weight in the region to acquire this property. And lucky us here in America, because of Kermit Lynch's relationship with it, we get plenty of it to drink. And that doesn't happen a lot. And a lot of France's best wines we get just a little bit of, and most of it stays in France and goes across Europe and lots of other parts of the world. We have to kind of get in line with everybody else. But I think we probably will get first billing on getting these wines because of a great importer's relationship with the winery. Hey, and that's great for us. And currently, if you notice it on my shelf, it's not nearly as expensive as it is anywhere else. So I would take advantage of that while you can. So for all of you that are looking at Wine Searcher and stuff, you ought to notice that pretty quick. You get a good deal right here at French Grocery on this wine. So, I hope the stories will inspire you to learn a little bit more about some other wines here, and maybe inspire you to buy some of these. But that's definitely the coolest thing about wine, in particular all these great old families from France and Italy and Germany. There really is no limit to what we can learn and what can make us excited about drinking wine, because everyone tells a story. It's not just simply the same wine every year. I mean, every vintage something's different. There's always setbacks. There's always things that you didn't count on. It's like life. And I don't really think wine is art so much as it is artisanship, but within artisanship, the inconsistencies often bring us some of the most beauty. So, anyway, we'll see you around. Come to French Grocery. Let's talk stories. Let's talk wine. Have a great week, guys. See you next week.